We'll also create a culture for listening. So it was taught in our Wonders of Worship when children were small, how to listen to a sermon. I mean, they taught them. And so when they got to be in 6th grade, then their teachers, every few months would have them take notes and turn them into me so I could read what they were doing. So you get a culture of listening. So those are some of the things.
That's an interesting comment you made about listening there, because I'm struck by how often in Scripture, hear, O Israel, hearing is a command.
Yeah.
It implies an activity on the one doing it.
Yeah.
So you actually taught people how to hear. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. One thing is you've got to be patient to affect a culture of hearing. And I remember when I first came to that context, they'd been with interim pastors for several years, and so you kind of get these one-offs, and they can be entertaining or whatever, whoever comes in does. And I noticed that a lot of the men didn't carry Bibles. And I think it's because they thought, I don't need to carry a Bible, or I can pick one out of the pew. And it took about a year to get people carrying Bibles, paying attention to what you have to do. And you can create a culture of listening within your church where the children think they're supposed to listen too. And where you hear the pages turn in the Bible, if you make a reference, it takes time to do that.
On Monday night, I went up to New York to hear the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Philadelphia, Charles Chaput, give the Erasmus lecture. And setting aside confessional and theological differences, he was speaking on the secularization of America, and also he talked about the loss of young people in the Roman Catholic Church. And I was struck by something he said that I think applies directly to Protestantism. He said, a lot of people say that the church is losing its people, young people, because they don't care about the church anymore. And he said, I don't think that's true. He said, we're losing our young people because their parents never taught them it was important. Now, I have a lot of disagreements with Roman Catholics, but I thought that was an interesting comment, that the church is losing its young people because the parents never taught the children that it was important. And I think that applies across the board. It applies to family worship. It also applies to whether you're in church every Sunday and what priority you demonstrate to your children church has on a Sunday. If the sun shines out and all their friends are going to the beach, do you decide to skip church for Sunday and take your kids to the beach? In which case you send the signal to your children that it's not that important. The need for pastors to preach the whole counsel of God. This came up, I was first challenged by this when I was an elder at the Free Church of Scotland in Aberdeen. In Aberdeen, the congregation was made up. There were some people who were, lived in Aberdeen and were there long term. But a lot of the congregation were either students from the university or people seconded to the oil industry, which is a highly mobile industry. So typically, maybe half of the congregation would be vanishing over a period of 3 years regularly, which to me raised the question of how does the pastor make sure that he's preached the whole counsel of God to those people during the time that he's got them. And I think if you're just preaching expository sermons, going through books of the Bible, that doesn't necessarily get you through the whole counsel of God very rapidly. If you've got people for 20, 25 years, yes. But if you've got somebody for 2, maybe 3 years, you may need a model that supplements that so that there are certain key doctrines that will get addressed that wouldn't get addressed otherwise. And it struck me there that some form of, not catechetical preaching, some form of thematic preaching based on catechetical categories might have been a useful way of at least making sure that if you're in our church for 2 years, you're going to be taught clearly on justification, clearly on the doctrine of God, clearly on election, clearly on the communion of the saints. So I would say, I wouldn't want to say you must preach on a catechism, but I think what catechetical preaching got at was something important. And that is, if you just preach on a single passage of Scripture each Sunday, you probably need something to supplement it to give people the bigger picture. And we live in a day where people need that bigger picture, because they don't know the Bible as thoroughly as they did in days past. It strikes me as bizarre that our solution to people not knowing the Word as well as they did 100 years ago is we have less services on a Sunday, shorter services on a Sunday, with less Word read and preached on a Sunday. That is a bizarre response to the crisis of biblical knowledge. But it seems to fly. It seems to fly.